The events unfold in 19th century France. Thea's father was a sea captain who spent most of his time away in Africa. After the death of Thea's mother, her father, unable to care for her due to his busy schedule, left her with his sister Madame Racan. He sent them a small allowance every month but never returned to see her again. At the time, Madame Racan had a son named Camille who had been frail and sickly for many years. Perhaps because of his constant illness, Madame Racan adored Camille immensely. She even arranged for Thérèse to share a room with him so she could help care for him. Over the years, both children grew up. Thérèse blossomed into a graceful and beautiful young woman, while Camille remained thin, pale, and in poor health. One day, Thérèse noticed a farmer working in his field. The sight of his strong, robust physique stirred something deep within her. Desire, like an electric charge, coursed through her body. In that moment, she impulsively asked Camille for a kiss. However, Camille, who had grown up with Thérèse as if they were siblings, felt only familial affection for her, devoid of passion or desire. This realization left Thérèse disheartened, but Camille was far from the ideal partner she envisioned. That very day, Thérèse received devastating news. Her father had died in a shipwreck. This loss meant not only the end of her family ties, but also the disappearance of the financial support she relied upon. Left with little choice, Thérèse reluctantly agreed to marry Camille when Madame Racan proposed the match. Despite her unwillingness, she lacked the strength and independence to refuse. She was now entirely dependent on her aunt and Camille. After the marriage, the three of them moved to Paris, where Camille secured a position at a company through one of Madame Ren's close friends. They rented a house on a narrow street, a dark and damp space that resembled a cellar, reflecting their bleak emotional state. To supplement the household income, Madame Racan opened a small shop. Camille remained weak and inexperienced, often becoming the target of bullying at work. He found solace in solitary visits to the zoo, where his childlike demeanor seemed to flourish. His lack of interest in marital intimacy left Thérèse feeling isolated, as though she were a widow in all but name. One day, Camille introduced Laurent, a childhood friend who now worked with him. Laurent was strikingly handsome, confident, and possessed a passion for painting, although his ambitions as an artist were overshadowed by his pragmatism. Camille commissioned Laurent to paint his portrait, which led to Laurent frequently visiting their home. Laurent's flamboyant personality and provocative conversations fascinated Thérèse. He would casually recount his romantic exploits, and every suggestive word seemed to ignite something within her. While painting Cam's portrait, Laurent depicted him as a weak and gloomy figure, complete with an unflattering realism that showed the blemishes on his face. Strangely, Camille admired the portrayal, believing it to capture his essence truthfully. Meanwhile, Laurent's charisma and boldness began to awaken suppressed desires in Thérèse. Laurent, perceptive and attuned to this unhappiness, quickly recognized her in a turmoil. Before long, the two began a clandestine affair, finding solace and passion in each other's company. Thérèse's demeanor transformed, her eyes sparkled with vitality as if life had just begun. Her relationship with Camille, however, grew increasingly strained. She preferred to sit awake at the edge of her bed rather than sleep beside him. What started as physical attraction between Thérèse and Laurent deepened into a powerful emotional bond. They became inseparable, their love consuming them entirely. At a certain moment, Thérèse was with Laurent, enjoying his company. She was unaware that her aunt had abruptly entered the room. In a hurry, she concealed him under her skirt and acted as though she was simply resting. However, while hidden, he began to make some movements. This led Thérèse to make an indescribable face, but her aunt misinterpreted the situation, assuming Thérèse wasn't feeling well, and offered her a massage. One day, Camille announced his decision to leave Paris and return to the countryside, believing the city's conditions were worsening his health. Thérèse, desperate to remain in Paris and close to Laurent, pleaded with Camille to reconsider. However, Camille, asserting his authority as the head of the household, refused to budge. Thérèse, now anxious and desperate, confided in Laurent she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Laurent proposed a sinister solution: they would stage an accident to kill Camille. Though Thérèse was initially shocked, she didn't outright reject the idea. Her overwhelming love for Laurent outweighed her moral reservations. Not long after, Camille surprised Thérèse with a gesture of romance. He gave her a flower, something he had never done before, and this act caught Thérèse off guard, but her heart remained conflicted. The three of them planned a picnic, during which Camille, exhausted from walking, rested his head on Thea's lap. This display of intimacy infuriated Laurent, intensifying his resolve to carry out the murder. Camille then suggested they go boating on the lake. Thérèse hesitated, sensing Laurent's intentions, but ultimately agreed, her love for Laurent overpowering her conscience. As they drifted into a secluded part of the lake, their sinister plan unfolded. There had been an accident on the boat. Only Laurent and Thérèse survived. Laurent fabricated a story claiming that when the boat capsized, Camille had selflessly urged him to save Thérèse first. By the time Laurent reached her, Camille had drowned. The community believed the tale and mourned the tragic accident. However, Thérèse was overcome with guilt and despair. Laurent reassured her, urging her to remain composed to avoid suspicion because their future depended on it. Madame Racan was shattered upon hearing the news of her son's death. It felt as though her entire world had collapsed. The search for Cam's body continued until it was finally recovered. Seeing his decomposed corpse left Lauren feeling physically ill. When Camille was buried, the physical barriers between Thérèse and Laurent were gone, but their newfound freedom brought no joy. Instead, they were consumed by guilt and torment over their crime. Thérèse in particular was deeply affected. Witnessing Madame constant tears and grief left her feeling haunted by guilt. The atmosphere grew increasingly somber. Thérèse began suffering from recurring nightmares, reliving the events on the lake. The horrifying scene of Camille's death played over and over in her mind, leaving her highly anxious and sensitive. To avoid suspicion, she and Lauren reduced the frequency of their meetings. Even when they did see each other, their interactions were no longer filled with the same passion. Thérèse, plagued by guilt, began to question Laurent about why he had killed Camille. Laurent in turn tried to reassure her, insisting that at least they could now be together. Madame Racan, who had always been fond of Laurent, remained oblivious to his Andar's role in Camilla's death. On the advice of acquaintances, she decided to arrange for Thérèse to marry Laurent. She even drafted a will leaving her shop and other assets to the couple. As they were now her only family after losing her son for Thérèse and Laurent, this seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start, and they were initially pleased. However, their happiness was short-lived when Madame Racan had a portrait of Camille in a bedroom. Every time Thérèse looked at it, she felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and dread. Meanwhile, Laurent bore a scar on his neck, a reminder of Cam's desperate struggle before his death. Both the portrait and the scar became persistent, haunting reminders of their crime. The terrible memories of the lake consumed Thérèse, and her feelings for Laurent changed. She could no longer look at him without recalling the horrifying image of him swinging. The couple's life together became defined by guilt and uns. Madame Racan meanwhile began to suffer mentally from her grief, often hallucinating her son's face and experiencing the pain of his loss. All over again, in the midst of her anguish, she suffered a stroke that left her bedridden and paralyzed. Laurent and Thérèse were now tasked with caring for her, which added to their growing misery. Laurent's ambitions as a painter remained unfulfilled, and he found himself trapped in a life far removed from the happiness he had envisioned. Thérèse to descended further into despair. At times she would blurt out cryptic remarks about killing someone in the love, and the couple frequently argued. They began blaming one another for Camilla's death. During one particularly heated exchange, Madame Racan overheard their conversation, and the horrifying truth was finally revealed to her. However, her paralysis left her unable to speak or expose them. The couple, realizing what she had learned, avoided further confrontations with her. At a party one day, Madame Racan made an attempt to expose the couple. Using her weak hand, she tried to write out the words revealing that Thérèse and Laurent had murdered Camille. However, she only managed to write their names before running out of strength, so the other guests misunderstood her message, assuming she was expressing gratitude for Thérèse and Laurent's care. While the couple escaped discovery, the incident left Thérèse even more paranoid about their crime being uncovered. Thérèse grew increasingly resentful of Madame Racan. She blamed her aunt for manipulating her life, starting with her forced marriage to Camille. This resentment, coupled with her guilt, drove Thérèse to indulge in reckless behavior. She sought solace in alcohol and wild gatherings, hoping to drown her past in forgetfulness. Her relationship with Laurent deteriorated further as she came to see him as the source of her suffering. Every time she looked at him, she was filled with regret and anger. One day, a friend of Madame Racan visited and stumbled upon the partially written message. Realizing its implications, the friend panicked and went to the authorities. When Thérèse discovered the message, she understood that their crime had been exposed. Strangely, instead of harboring resentment toward Madame Racan, she was overcome with guilt and begged for forgiveness. The weight of their crime had finally come to light. Knowing the police would arrive soon, Thérèse and Laurent resigned themselves to their fate. In a final act, they decided to end their lives together. They took Madame to the banks of the Seine, where they planned their last moments. For the first time in a long while, they opened up to each other with honesty. Thérèse prepared a knife while Laurent brought poison. When they realized their intentions aligned, they felt a sense of relief. Laurent took the first sip of the poison, followed by Thérèse, who drank the rest. As the poison took hold, they curled up together like two broken birds. In their final moments, they found a strange sense of peace as death washed away their sins and pain.